Hello and welcome back to Rally Point. We had a brief hiatus there where we... oh, is my mic muted? Of course it is.
That's what happens. That's what happens when you go to the loo before you start the stream. Hello and welcome back to Rally Point. We had a brief hiatus for a few weeks where we were doing a bit of filming, so we had to use the room. But we're back. We're back in the studio, and I'm joined by two very illustrious guests. We have Peter Stewart. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm not bad. How are you? I've missed being here.
Yeah, would you like to introduce yourself to anyone who hasn't seen your stream before?
Right there. No, my name is Pete. I'm a writer on Total War, generally speaking, but right now and for the last long time, I've been sort of the main writer or writers on Three Kingdoms.
Mm-hmm. And to your right, we have a man who, there was a brief period in history where if you didn't know who he was, it was an actual federal crime. It's Mr. Al Bickham.
Hi.
You are the
me.
Dev Communications Manager?
Dev Communications Manager, yeah. So, oh God, I do all sorts of stuff. Yeah, talking about the game mostly.
Yeah.
Because quite often, as you probably know, developers are really, really busy making games. So
yes.
I
Look at
tend
me, how
to
busy I am.
exactly. Apart from this guy, right? So I tend to go out on the road and talk about, talk about features of the game, or do interviews, or chat with, press or influencers or whatever. So, yeah, all sorts really.
And more importantly, for this stream, you were the creator of the two-part diplomacy Let's Play.
Yes,
which
indeed.
we'll be talking about briefly at the end of the stream.
Mm-hmm.
Well, more in depth anyway, but yeah, we'll see.
Right.
But first things first, we have a brand new trailer just dropped yesterday for a very exciting character, which we're going to shove on screen right now so you can see in the background. So, who is Mr. Peter Stewart? Who is Zheng Jiang?
Who is Jiang Jiang? Jiang Jiang is the bandit queen. She leads a sort of infamous group of bandits and sort of ne'er-do-wells in the sort of northwestern areas of China, and she is a perennial thorn in the side of the Han officials and those trying to sort of bring things back together after the chaos. Historically speaking, there is not as much known about her as some of the other characters, but she is spoken about as being a thorn in people's side. It was said that I forgot the name of the particular sort of official, but it was someone in Cao Cao's court. He had a dream, like a vision, of a snake, snake with feet, which we would more commonly call like a lizard these days. But they seem to be intent on it being a snake, and in sort of that time and that sort of mythology, snake is generally interpreted as being sort of woman, of being female and feminine form, and so he gave it a name, Zheng Jiang. And then that's where things get a little bit hazy, because in some modern or more modern interpretations, there is a comma between Zheng and Jiang, implying that it could be either one person called Zheng Jiang or a Zheng and a Jiang. So we, as we often do when we get a little bit stumped by the more obscure elements of Han history, consulted with Rafe de Crispney, our illustrious and absolutely unquestioned academic mastermind.
Big Daddy China, I believe.
Big Daddy of China, is what I called him in a video that has never been released.
Thank God.
And yeah, so he knows his stuff, but he was well aware of the fact there's a bit of contention between whether there's one person or two people. But in the end, he sort of stumped and said, I think there might be two. I'm leaning towards two. So we've sort of represented that in the game as well, with Zheng Jiang being the faction leader, and then another character called Liu Jiang, sorry, that's the first name. Liu Jiang being sort of a high-ranking person within that faction as well. So the two of them are represented like that, and that's who those two are.
Yeah, so we got our first glimpse of her, and what a gorgeous trailer as well.
Isn't it
some
just?
of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen in a Total War trailer, I think. Especially with some of that, I guess, volumetric lighting coming through the trees, that beautiful orange hue.
Metaphors with the walls and everything.
Amazing.
So good.
So you, of course, wrote the words for this trailer.
Yeah, I helped.
So what was the sort of the key direction behind this?
The idea behind it was her being, as the beginning, they can't hear it, can they? No, unfortunately.
No.
The beginning, but I'm sure they've seen it. She's just saying, what threat could she possibly pose? What's the big deal? She's just one person. And then the other general speaking to his lieutenant saying, one person, like, you're a fool if you think that just one person, just one woman can be irrelevant. And then the line is, even the slightest cut, if left to fester, will were left unchecked will fester all the same, which is the idea that if you don't deal with the smallest of problems, or what seems to be an irrelevant problem, it will, as you see here, rise up, get bigger, and overwhelm you, which is, as we see, he left it, he didn't do anything, and now he's facing on an unstoppable wave. And that's kind of how Zheng Jiang, how we approach her in the game as well, as how you might play as her.
Yeah.
It's not particularly an easy start position to start as Zheng Jiang, but if you keep going and you keep sort of picking away, and I wouldn't quite say guerrilla warfare, but sort of just like pushing and pushing and building, you'll end up in this kind of position as well.
Yeah, so that kind of brings us on to another point of conversation, which is so one of the main comments that we got when this trailer dropped was, I'm not familiar with this character, essentially. You know, I've not heard of her. You know, who is she? Why is she relevant? Why did we pick her, essentially? And there's a few reasons for that, but one being was we wanted something that was really going to challenge the players.
Yeah, I mean, it's a relatively fair point. She is a little bit of historical sort of obscuria. She's not hugely known like maybe Cao Cao or definitely like Dong Zhuo or someone like that. But it doesn't make her any less relevant, we didn't think, to the story that we're trying to tell, which is all of these pieces in China moving around during this chaos and seeing if they can make names for themselves. Because even some of the more established characters, like Sun Zhen, historically speaking, Sun Zhen didn't last very long after 190, and it was more his sons that did most of the work. But if you play Sun Zhen better than Sun Zhen played Sun Zhen, then you might find that you've got a whole campaign there and he doesn't die.
Yeah.
And Jiang Jiang, although she fades from sort of the history texts fairly swiftly after she appears in them, there is still so much room for the player to sort of push forward and see what they can do with her. And also, like you said, we wanted to experiment with a lot of different types of starting position for players. And Jiang Jiang starts off in a particularly not great position. It's a bit difficult. She's not got the power backing or the infrastructure as some of the Han warlords have. So you have to experiment with how you play those very crucial first 5, 10, 20 turns, getting a power hold that she didn't have at the time. And then if you can do that, then you can make her what she never became in reality.
Yeah, the character actually narrating the trailer is Ma Teng, I
That's
believe,
correct,
and he's one of the main forces that you'll have to deal with. But then you're also flanked by another named sort of main character, which is going to make you sort of sweat a little bit. It's going to be very, very difficult to,
she starts off
to survive at the start.
because if she is, as like she was believed to be, a thorn in everyone's side, then no one's gonna want to treat with her. There is 1 or 2 generals, though they aren't directly relevant to her in the starting position, that maybe consider that she might be useful. But that's sort of a pragmatic approach rather than an honourable one, if you see what I mean. A lot of these Han generals are still dealing, although they are willing to stab each other in the back later on, they're still dealing with almost like the Queensberry boxing rules of Han officials. It's like, I will fight you, but for now, let's pretend that the Han is still a thing and be good boys about it.
Exactly.
And she's like, no. And they're like, oh, she's here. Guess we better deal with her. Except for 1 or 2, a bit more pragmatic, who are like, she could be of use to me, as long as that lasts. So she'll never really feel safe. Until she is on top of it all herself, until she's the winner.
So that's something that I think is going to be quite exciting for especially for returning Total War players who are maybe some of the veterans who want something a little bit more challenging. But with that sort of unique place that she has in like the politics of the world, does that mean that she's really going to struggle getting people on side? And with this new robust diplomacy system that we've been talking about, that's something that she's going to maybe have less agency with, perhaps? Perhaps.
She can interact with the diplomacy system like any of the other generals, but she may find at the beginning that there is a fairly negative penalty from almost everybody willing to deal with her. She might get some, maybe some military pacts out of some of them, maybe a coalition or 2, but it's highly unlikely that someone's going to be saying, sure, let's be in a military alliance, let's trade with each other, because largely most people won't want her to be lasting for long. Many people have their own designs on China, or at least the immediate surrounding area, and so she's just going to be in the way for them, and it's going to recognize that.
Well, fantastic. Looking forward to more information on her in the future, and of course make sure you keep an eye to all of our channels, including YouTube, of course, where we'll be posting all of our Three Kingdoms Let's Plays. Speaking of Let's Plays, and speaking of the man himself, Mr. Al Bickham. So you graced us with a glorious 2-parter looking into this new robust diplomacy system. So we thought we'd bring you on to have a quick conversation about that and some of the changes that we've made. So before we start, as just a a sort of quick guide for anyone who missed the videos. What general changes have we made to diplomacy?
Excuse me. So we've rewritten the whole thing. I guess that's a fairly general change. So we've rewritten it, and we've rewritten the campaign AI to interact with it in a more effective way as well. So the way you'll see that from the start of the game, the way you'll see that manifested most of all is when you look at. We don't just have a list of diplomacy options now. We have different categories of diplomacy option. You know, you've got war and peace, and alliances, and trade. You've got within those subcategories, you've got a whole host of different options that we've never had before, and some we have had before, such as region trading, which works in a slightly different way now. But beyond that, there's a whole load of new bargaining chips that you can employ. So you can trade food, for example. Food plugs into a bunch of different systems and is very important, especially for your armies and your populations as well. Running out of food is a really bad thing. So
funnily enough,
securing food supplies, if not geographically, then diplomatically, is quite crucial, and something you'll want to start looking at pretty much as soon as you start the game. If you're playing as a faction that doesn't naturally own farmland, and there's none around you to grab, or you're going to threaten you're going to go to war with somebody big to grab their farmland, then securing it diplomatically is quite important.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can trade food, you can trade ancillaries. Ancillaries come in a variety of different forms. You get these kind of ornamental ones, like a beautiful carved duck or something, which will
wooden mallard.
Exactly. Yeah. The wooden mallard of +10 diplomacy and other such items. Excuse me, I've just got off a horrible cold and I've still got a cough.
A glass of water.
So you get everything has a bonus of some kind. You get and they range in value from,
and some with negatives as well, of course.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But the top end stuff is going to be things like major character ancillaries that give you little character followers that give you major bonuses and stuff. Legendary weapons, of course, or legendary mounts. So there's situations where because the AI looks very carefully and values stuff with a whole new range of different variables, it's going to find stuff that it really values. So you might get an aggressive faction that likes to go to war a lot. It's really going to value that really powerful, bristling with bonuses, two-handed pole arm that you own. That's in your little ancillary cupboard. So it might come to you and go, "I really want that. I'll give you a piece of land for that." Or here's 5,000 gold, and that's great because that's like a starting point for negotiation. Because as you know, if you watch the video, you can haggle now, right? So you can go 5,000 gold. What does that translate to in terms of food and ancillaries that you might own, or can I get a good treaty out of you? Can I get you to go to war with someone I don't like that might be a low threat to you, but would be really useful for me if you were involved as well, because it'll open up a second front for them, or, something like that. So the stacking up of different diplomatic options, and the way that you can haggle with that, and the way that you can very gradually kind of add or remove levels of resources as well, just adds so many shades of grey, so much subtlety and refinement to the whole thing that it feels completely different.
And this is one of the key changes, is the fact that diplomacy is a lot more readable now. It's up until this point, it's maybe been a bit obscured. And you're hoping that this will happen, and you'll get like a vague idea of whether or not they'll accept. But now there's hard numbers on how much this is actually valuable to someone. Yeah,
exactly. As soon as you want a treaty with this guy, you're like, okay, let's have a non-aggression pact. Let's pick something basic like that. You get a non-aggression pact. You stick it on the diplomatic table, and there's a button that says "Make this work." So you click that, and it instantly goes ka-ching, and it tells you how much he values it. Usually, he'll come back with a cash figure. Or you can do turn-by-turn payment agreements as well, which the basic agreement is 10 turns, right? So for 10 turns, he might ask you for 200 gold for 10 turns, right? Value of 2,000. If you're cash rich, but you've got an ongoing war, you might want to go, I don't really want to tie myself into a loan shark agreement like that. how about I give you 4,000 now, or or 2,000 now, or whatever it is, so you can play around with that. You can play around with those numbers.
Yeah, and it's not just the make this work button. There's a few different sort of quality of life improvements. We've got the quick deal.
Quick deal's great. Well. Yeah, quick deal's great. You can just turbo your way through basic stuff. So you click quick deal, and it shows you a list of who's going to do that deal with you pretty much automatically, who might do and might need some negotiation, however big or small. There's always going to be a range there. So you click them and you click make this work and find out what the price is. And there's always going to be, there may be people who will never do that deal with you because you've been at war with them for so long they hate your guts or whatever it is. Exactly. So you're never going to do a non-aggression pact with you. So.
And a few other tools that we've been given, of course, ultimatums being an interesting new addition. So if you perhaps can't find the correct deal for getting something that you want, you could just tell them, if you don't give me this, then I will murder everyone that you love.
It's
a diplomatic tact.
Exactly. So in that situation, what you've really got to do is make a broad assessment of is this the wise thing for me to do? Because if you make that threat and they laugh you out the room because actually they're twice as powerful as you militarily, and you haven't looked at their military power, and you haven't looked at the kind of alliances they're in or the allies they have in various areas, look at their diplomatic relationships. Because, you get that valuation when you're normally doing deals, but as soon as you start using ultimatums, as you threaten an ultimatum, you get no visibility on their valuation of that deal, right? Of that negotiation. So it won't say this is worth this much to me. You put that on the table, and they're just going to keep their cards close to their chest.
It's you going all in, essentially.
Yeah, you have to make you have to put your blindfold on and think very hard about what those, what your strength rating is versus theirs, and try and figure in as much detail as you can from what you know about that faction. Because if it goes wrong, you go to war with them, right? And if you didn't really want that and you thought you could get away with it, then well, you've dialed yourself into a war you might not want.
And of course, all of these things can happen to you. The AI might issue an ultimatum. This happened to me when I was prepping for one of our Let's Plays. I had a quite valuable little jade mine sat there, and someone issued me an ultimatum: give me that jade mine right now, or we're going to war. And it's a case of, do I call the AI's bluff, or are they giving me an out of something that I really don't want to be doing?
Absolutely.
So with such a sort of interesting new mechanic for players to get their hands on. Obviously, there's been a lot of questions, a lot of nooks and crannies that they want to explore and find out all the ins and outs and workings. But before we get to those, quickly, one of the key things that popped up in your Let's Play was the Han Empire. So the Han Empire are a bit of an interesting faction in the game.
Okay.
So players would like to know. The players would like to know, how do they work essentially?
So the Han Empire in a broad sense, they don't work like other factions. The Han Empire are loyal to the Han Emperor, Jiang, right? Jiang starts the game under the control of Dongzhuo, right? That means basically whoever controls the child emperor essentially owns the Han Empire as a vassal, right? They are an automatic vassal state. If whoever
controls
is
the space.
Controls the universe. So whoever has the emperor has the Han Empire as a vassal, right? So if you were to go and destroy Dongzhuo and crucially capture his faction capital, you gain ownership of the emperor, of the young emperor, and the Han Empire becomes your vassal, right? The way that stops happening is late game. So late game is, and I've seen a lot of talk about region divide, and that's not how it works. It's quite different. We've never quite had an end game like this, because what happens is, as you rise up through the faction ranks, the top rank is emperor, right? And you will have a battle between people trying to become the ultimate emperor, right? So up to 3 factions, or 3 warlords, I should say, can proclaim themselves emperor. Right? And the end game is a war between those emperors, basically, to define who is the. You can stop someone being an emperor by just by capturing their faction capital. That will make them abdicate their claim. Also, there's ways. I mean, if you threaten them if they're absolutely terrified of you militarily, they may even just abdicate their claim to emperor. And the idea is you're the last emperor left standing, and then that's one of the major victory conditions. Now, when you get 3 claims to the emperor in the mix in the campaign
kingdoms,
game,
if you will.
yes, precisely. When you get 3
sound
kingdoms aiming to be unified under one, the child emperor of the Han Empire goes, "I'm out. This is up to you now." He effectively abdicates his claim.
Yeah.
And he passes from the game as a pawn. He's no longer there as a pawn, right? So, and at that point, the Han effectively becomes free faction.
Yeah.
Effectively becomes like a standard faction, only under the vassalage of whoever owned him the last time,
yeah.
whoever's got them as a vassal at the moment. And likewise, if you are in control of Xi'an, and you hit the top faction rank and you proclaim yourself as one of the emperors, then he will abdicate his claim there and then.
Yeah.
So you'll still have the Han as a vassal to you because you already had Xi'an as your pawn. But he withdraws his claim. He's no longer the emperor.
It's kind of like when it becomes obvious that the Han is sort of a spent force in
Yeah.
China. It's like, which is also kind of what happened in history. It's
Mm.
like once Cao Pi, I think, became like emperor, he was the Han emperor was like, bye.
Yeah,
So-
we're out.
Well, that's
So-
so the interesting thing about the Han on the campaign map is they are like visibly capitulating. Like they have way too much territory for them to control.
Absolutely.
So right at the start of the game, it becomes your sort of your first target is especially when you're a coalition force, for example. It's your first target to get yourself some land back because those are the weakest factions, and it's as they start to diminish, they start to become less valuable.
Most factions, you start off and there's usually a pocket of Yellow Turban Rebellion around you somewhere, like a minor faction, which gives you your first taste of battle. And most of the time, actually most of the factions that I've played as so far, there's some Han Empire rich pickings nearby, a farm here or a mine there, and actually that's possibly something we haven't particularly clarified is how provinces are defined in 3 kingdoms. So we have so provinces are now commanderies. That's our kind of region, our region sensitive kind of name for the area. So you have commanderies and counties, right? And a commandery consists of a main sort of capital building slot. So that's your start. It might start as a small town, and then you can build it up and grow it, and get extra bonuses and all that sort of stuff. And it usually has 2 to 4 building slots attached as well. So you get different options, new stuff you'll unlock all over the place to in the building browser. And then attached to that you have counties, and some have no counties, some have I think 2, and these tend to fall into resource categories. So you get things like iron mines and farmland, of course, absolutely crucial farmland, and temples as well. Temples, a county can contain a temple, and that's the main reason for that sort of county. So, commanderies and counties. That's kind of how it works now.
Yeah, so that's also one of the deciding factors in how the AI will evaluate these lands as well, which brings me on to the next question that we've had from the community. Of course, with such a powerful system, you always have to consider how are the computer control factions going to interact with that.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you put yourself in a situation where the AI are just ignoring it, then it's not going to be that powerful. But as you say, we've rewritten the AI to really use this as like the bed of their operations.
Yeah. So part of that rewrite, actually the fundamental part of that rewrite is that we've moved from a hard-coded AI system to a data-driven system, right?
Yeah.
Which offers tons more flexibility, not only by faction, but also with the amount of kind of weighting and evaluation we can put on different options on different resources in the game, right? So if we add a new diplomacy option, we can go, the AI should value that for these reasons, right?
Yeah.
So, and because it does so, because it strongly values these things, it will come to you for trades. It will, you'll definitely see it like early on, coalitions rising around you. And, I was playing as Liu Bei the other day, and I think it turned 3. Yuan Shao, is Dr. Coalition, because he can start that right from the very start, from his basic faction rank. Most people need to get to Marquis first. And I think turn 2 or 3, he was like, want to be in my gang? So I'm like, yeah, great. Early on, that's a really nice thing.
Like today as well.
Yeah,
He's just like, hello, it's me again.
Yeah.
Dr. Coalition. You like my collection of coalitions?
Oh, I know what you heard about the previous coalition, but put that out of your mind.
Yeah, forget about that. That's all over.
I got a deal for
the
you.
new one's great. Yeah. So yeah, you really will see the AI actively engaging with diplomacy a lot. Like it's like I mentioned earlier. If you have, because of its personality, because of its character, because of its particular goals and drives, and what it's trying to achieve in the campaign game, if you've got an ancillary it really likes, it will come to you for that. If it's got no food and it's starving, it will look for someone to trade for food. So you'll see it engage. Yeah.
And you know those informations on how those factions act is available to you as well. I'm not sure if you touched on that in Diplomacy Let's Play, but every single sort of faction leader, if you look under their name in the Diplomacy, they've got like a short description of the kind of person they are. You hover over that, it gives you all kinds of details. You know, this guy's arrogant, he will never join your coalition, he will only ever form his own in the case of Yuan Shao.
Yeah, exactly.
Or this guy's super aggressive, or this person is treacherous or manipulative, all those kind of things.
Yeah, all that will define their playstyle, and it will define how likely they are to trade with you or trade with other people. You know, they'll prefer dealing with certain characters rather than other characters. So yeah, all that stuff, it all plays in. And
there's also, of course, as we said, the ability to evaluate the worth of things is not just based on like hard stats. It's based on how the world has changed since the last time they were looking at it, right? So, for example, if Cao Cao sits in 4 different commanderies and he's living on cloud 9, but he has no food to support any of them, then suddenly if you were to try and trade a region with him, say you've got this lovely livestock farm, which is pretty high level, suddenly that becomes incredibly valuable to him because he's desperate for food. You know?
Yeah, exactly. They also really are really responsive to diplomatic standing. It's very much action driven. If you play the game in a certain way, the AI is going to react to that, and your diplomatic standing will be affected by that. So you know, especially kind of notes aggressive play and eyes that suspiciously, and less trust. You may have seen the trustworthiness rating on the side. Like, you do treacherous actions, it's less. If you go and make a deal and you break that deal in 3 turns, when actually, you know, that payment was, you know, a 10-turn deal, then and you break it off soon, then they're not going to trust you to do that deal. Yeah, you know, until you get your trustworthy back.
There's also sort of situations. Almost, exactly. If there's also situations where you might plan out this deal and you think you're sitting pretty with your brand new deal that you've worked out, and then you forget to check that the guy that you just made a deal with is the biggest backstabber in all of China, and he's just gone, oh, actually, I'm going to declare war on you now. So you need to factor in how those AIs are going to operate.
Yeah, do your homework, man. Yeah, totally.
So the next question we have is a few people point out that you, I think you just briefly hovered over it. It's just how perceptive our community is.
Did I just provide a tooltip?
Yes, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. There's a diplomatic penalty as you become bigger and stronger as a faction.
Right, yeah.
And they were wondering if that affects the AI as well.
So there is diplomatic penalty for being a larger faction. And that applies to all factions and with their diplomatic standing with each other as well. So it's not just a player thing, right? Yeah. So there will be a slight impact for being a large faction, but it's pretty minor in the greater scheme of things. There's a whole bunch of potential diplomatic modifiers that's going to affect standing, right? So you've got that, you've got your trustworthiness rating. The biggest one actually is probably aggression. If you play really, really aggressively, that's going to have a much bigger effect on your diplomatic standing. If an AI faction is acting really aggressively and attacking all its neighbours, or just stealing their land, or you know, and being untrustworthy and all that kind of stuff, the other AIs are going to respond to that. It's going to get negative standing with them. So there's no imperium level as such. There's that you get. Your size does mean a minor diplomatic, negative impact, but it's not overwhelming like the Imperium was.
Yeah, and to carry on from that, speaking on sort of like the strength of your faction, a lot of people were asking if there are sort of penalties for leaving those military alliances and coalitions that you form throughout the campaign.
Right, yeah. Yes, there's a diplomatic penalty for leaving. If you're like, yeah, see you later, guys, and we had this good thing going. So you will have, there is a diplomatic penalty for leaving. But actually, that might not be the worst thing about leaving.
Yeah.
There's other things about leaving as well. One of them is that all AI factions view all other factions when they're in alliances as coalitions stronger than they are on their own. Right? So that every AI considers in all its diplomatic negotiations and stuff a whole range of different variables, and one of those variables is how militarily strong you are. Right? That factors into their decision making. And yeah, when you are always viewed as stronger when you're in a coalition or a military alliance. So it might actually benefit you, and you might want to take that diplomatic hit to appear weaker and go alone. There may be circumstances in the game when that's actually useful for you. I mean, the general reasons why you might want to leave a coalition or a military alliance are that it's all going south. You know?
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe one of the other, you're in an alliance and one of the other factions has called you, because military alliances are binding agreements. So if somebody declares an alliance war with another faction or another alliance, and that's fun, like alliance wars going on late game, that might put you on a really tricky position. You might be on the forefront of that war, you know, territorially. So you might be about to get steamrolled. So if you leave it and try and sue for peace individually, maybe with the guys around your border, that might be worth doing for the diplomatic hit. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts.
Yeah,
it's a really nice complex system.
It's a robust system, and it's the nice thing about it is that it is so reactionary. I think with previous diplomatic systems that we've had, they've been a bit more sort of solidified in how they work. You know, you can sort of predict what's going on based on you know, previous campaigns that you've had. But with the sort of unpredictability of this, but also the readability, it gives you nice situations where it's like, I understand why this is happening. It feels a bit more human as well. It's like, okay, I get why you're being a dick, because you're a dick. That's just who you are. You know?
That's your character trait.
Yeah, exactly. Trait, dick. Well, very interesting. So lots of stuff to get your teeth into there. Lots of things to ponder and speculate about. And of course, you can grab Three Kingdoms for pre-order right now. It comes with the free Yellow Turban Rebellion DLC as well, and that's available the week after purchase as well. So week after release, sorry. So you'll be able to grab that as an early adopter bonus. So thank you very much for watching, guys. Make sure you go and have a watch of those Diplomacy Let's Plays and the Jiang Jiang trailer if you haven't already. Thank you very much to Pete and Al for joining me. You've been wonderful guests as always.
Pleasure.
And Pete, we're going to go play some board games now, aren't we?
Are we? Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah. Thanks very much for watching, guys. We'll see you soon. And remember,
see you soon.